Interview with the Vampire is an AMC series about a pair of blood-sucking monsters who get into a dysfunctional on-again, off-again relationship that lasts for over a century. It's also about their daughter, who is so upset over them turning her into a child vampire that she's still angry about it 80 years after her death. It's also about memory.
It was raining.
We skip back and forth in time a lot. There's a framing story in the present, and then we flash back to the 1910s and the 40s and the 70s and the 18th century, and also the future. And we always have to ask whether what we're seeing is actually the truth, because it's being told to us by a series of unreliable narrators who are ashamed or manipulative or overly dramatic. Oh, and in the third season, the show suddenly turns into a rock opera, and it's not called Interview with the Vampire anymore. It's called The Vampire Lestat, because why not change the name of your TV show in the middle of the run? This show is hard to pin down, which might be one of the reasons why it hasn't broken out and become the monster hit that its biggest fans think it should be. But the people who are on board are extremely on board. Like, critics slobber over this series and fans go nuts for it on social media. This is incredibly unscientific, but if we wanted to measure how passionate a given fan base is for a TV show, we could look at Archive of Our Own, which is a site dedicated to fan fiction. Stories set in the world of a movie or a TV show or a book or whatever, written by the fans who love it. Archive of Our Own hosts 12,000 fanfics based on Interview with the Vampire, which means that thousands of people watched the show and were inspired to write stories about it. Meanwhile, a show like The Bear, which began the same year as Interview with the Vampire and has won lots of Emmys and has a much bigger cultural footprint, has not quite 3,000 fics. So Interview with the Vampire has a passionate fan base, but it's not a particularly large fan base. Ratings were never great, even at the start, and diminished with future seasons. And yet, AMC has seen fit to produce not one, but two spin-off series, Mayfair Witches and Talamasca, The Secret Order, and apparently they have plans for more. Why would AMC try to build a cinematic universe around a show with such a niche appeal? Are the spin-offs any good? And what makes the original show so special that people like me are inspired to make videos about it? Those are some of the questions I want to explore on this episode of Interview with the Vampire is based on the Vampire Chronicles books by author Anne Rice. She published the original book, called Interview with the Vampire, in 1976, and kept writing them almost up to her death in 2021. The series got a new generation of fans in the 1990s, when Warner Bros. Made an Interview with the Vampire movie starring Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise as dysfunctional undead life partners Louis and Lestat, with a young Kirsten Dunst as their vampire child Claudia. I saw this movie when I was a kid, and I liked it, but it didn't inspire me to go read any Anne Rice or anything. And when I heard that AMC was making a TV show about it, I figured it would just be another unremarkable cash grab. After all, how many times has Hollywood haphazardly remade some beloved classic just to make a quick buck? But upon actually watching the series, it was clear that showrunner Roland Jones and his team were trying something different. The show moves the setting from 18th century New Orleans to the early 20th century, and it casts Jacob Anderson from Game of Thrones as Louis, the main character. Casting a black man as Louis opens up all kinds of new thematic avenues for the show to explore. His relationship with Lestat is still all kinds of toxic, but now there are all these juicy new layers to it.
Color, white, Creole, French, queer, half queer, mostly queer, what is it? Non-discriminated.
The show also takes the homoerotic subtext running through Rice's books and makes it explicit. But overall, it's one of the rare adaptations that maintains the spirit of the original work despite changing a lot of the particulars, at least in the first two seasons. There's a lot of yearning in Interview with the Vampire, which is very much in keeping with Rice's conception of vampires as tortured souls who must wander the long dark black of eternity alone. As horribly as Louis and Lestat can treat each other, the show is also a love story, and a pretty convincing one. It's also got a wicked sense of humor and some scenes that are as gnarly as anything you'll see in a horror movie. The main characters are mostly unrepentant serial murderers, but the show makes them sympathetic anyway. It's both very earnest and deeply twisted, and it's made with the care and craft of a good prestige drama. By the time I got to the end of the second season, I was well and truly hooked, and this time I was inspired to go read some Anne Rice books. I picked up and read The Vampire Lestat ahead of the third season, and at first, I sort of wished I hadn't. The show goes much farther afield of its source material in Season 3. The focus shifts from Louis to Lestat, played by Sam Reed, which is expected, but it spends way less time on flashbacks than the book does, probably because it would have been prohibitively expensive to build all the big historical sets and stuff needed to adapt the book properly. Instead, we spend a lot of time with Lestat and his band on the road as he sings songs about his life. And although it took some getting used to, by the end of the season I was mostly sold on this pivot. For one thing, some of the songs are genuine bangers that fully made their way into my shower rotation, and Sam Reed is clearly having the time of his life playing this role. The tone and the editing are a lot more frantic than before, which could be a little annoying at first, but the show also knows when to slow down and deliver the emotional gut punches fans have come to expect. Like the first 2 seasons, the third gets better as it goes. So Interview with the Vampire is a great TV show. This has been established. The spin-offs, on the other hand... So remember, one way we can try and measure how passionate a fan base is for a given TV show is to look at how many people have been inspired to write fan fiction about it. Interview with the Vampire has over 12,000 fics on Archive of Our Own, very impressive for a show of its size. Mayfair Witches has 38. Talamasca the Secret Order has 49. That's a little better. Again, this isn't a definitive metric. There are other indicators we could look at, but in general, I see a lot more people online talking about Interview than I do either of the 2 spin-off shows, so I think it tracks. And after watching the 2 spin-off shows myself, I think it's mostly deserved. I'm not saying these shows are terrible, they're not, but they do feel a little rote, a little also ran, a little uninspired. Mayfair Witches is based on Anne Rice's Lives of the Mayfair Witches books, about a neurosurgeon named Rowan who discovers that she is descended from a powerful line of witches. As it happens, she's been named the new head of the family, and now has to deal with a mysterious entity named Lasher, who has helped the Mayfair family become prosperous over the past several generations. Through one of the most oft-repeated lines from Interview with the Vampire is,
"Let the tale seduce you, just as I was seduced."
Louis says it to Daniel Malloy, that's the guy conducting the interview, also low-key the best character on the show, just my opinion, before telling him the story of his life. And it's kind of a promise that the show makes good on. Interview with the Vampire is lush, it's well acted, it's eerie, it's funny, it's heartbreaking. It's easy to get seduced by this tale. If I had to name my biggest problem with Mayfair Witches, it's that there is a lack of seduction going on. The show tries to build up the relationship between Rowan and Lasher as dangerous and sexy, kind of like the one between Louis and Lestat, but the chemistry just isn't really there.
Do you wear masks?
No.
A lot of the dialogue is just characters explaining the plot to each other, and the acting in general is a step below what you'll see in the Mothership show. I'm not saying Mayfair Witches is god-awful. It's not. It's alright. But I definitely felt my attention wandering a bit while I watched it. It's hard to see myself falling in love with a show like this. On balance, I think I enjoyed Talamasca the Secret Order a bit more. It's basically a spy drama with some vampires and witches and stuff mixed in. We follow Guy Anatole, I don't know where they got that name from, a young psychic who gets recruited into the Talamasca, a secret order that keeps tabs on all things spooky and supernatural. The show feels very insular. Like, the main conflict is that one branch of the Talamasca has been taken over by an evil vampire named Jasper, who wears a lot of denim and kind of has a Randall Flagg thing going on. So Guy has to infiltrate this branch on behalf of a different branch. The cast is pretty small. This wig is so bad I had to include a clip of it, and it comes back multiple times. That was crazy to me. And the plotting is less than airtight.
How do I reach you?
You don't. There's a very strong chance that once you leave, we won't see each other again. We need you, given your connection to the girl, to pursue the answer to that part of the puzzle.
I liked some things about the show. The high point is probably this surreal vampire gangster scene from episode 4, which plays out over some 1980s pop funk. It kind of has a Coen Brothers feel to it. But nothing about the show is good enough. Like with Mayfair Witches, much of the dialogue feels utilitarian. Like it's a lot of people explaining the plot to each other. And that stands out after watching Interview with the Vampire, where a lot of the dialogue feels like rich and playful and evocative. For instance, in the Talamasca show, there's a bit where a witch named Doris bemoans that everyone who gets close to her gets hurt.
This is what happens when people get close to me. First Kevis, now the witches.
Now, variations on this speech show up in tons of movies and TV shows, even if you've never thought about it. You know, I can't get close to anyone because I'll only hurt them. That's why I have to be alone.
Bad shit happens to people I care about. Understand me?
I come from poison. I have poison inside me, and I destroy everything I touch.
Look, I found a way to survive my secrets, but everybody that I care about gets hurt.
It's definitely a cliche, and it shows up in the Vampire Lestat too. But look at what the show does with it.
This is the metal sun inside my veins. This is the hell I unleash on all those near me. It cannot be restrained in the moment or tamed over time. It will drag you into depravity and reward you with regret.
This is the metal sun inside my veins? Who cares if it's a cliche? The writers have gone out of their way to make it seem new and different and intense. I don't know if it's because Roland Jones began his career as a playwright or something, but it feels like the writers on Interview with the Vampire care a lot about language. They're always coming up with these interesting turns of phrase and poetic interludes and 20 original songs for the third season, lest we forget.
I loved the music. I loved it. It was compelling me forward, pulling me through the perennial walls of my psyche, and I thought, why not ride it to blindness? Because it seemed possible. This was the muddy bottom, and on the other side, a marble floor, polished to the horizon. Music in its purest expression would make me worse, and then make me better.
They craft the dialogue with a lot of creativity and love. You also sense that love in the performances and in the costuming and in the way the show remixes and foreshadows things that won't be relevant until long down the line.
Those who must be kept.
What was that?
Nothing.
Basically, Interview with the Vampire feels like a passion project. It feels like the people who make it really want to make it and have something to say. But Mayfair Witches and Talamasca feel like mandates. They're competently made TV shows. They're not horrible, but they're not great either. I'd say they're on the lower end of good, gradiating into mediocre. They do not feel like passion projects. They feel like shows that exist because AMC wanted to build out a cinematic universe based on Anne Rice's books. And in order to have a cinematic universe, you need more than one show, so here we are. But we still haven't answered the question of why AMC would do this. You know, conventional wisdom would say that you would only make a spin-off of a show if the original show is popular enough to justify one, because then you can be sure that at least some of the audience from that original show will tune in for the new one. So for example, HBO had a generational hit with Game of Thrones, so it could rest assured that some of that audience would at least try watching spin-offs like House of the Dragon and A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, both of which only premiered years after Game of Thrones was over. But Interview with the Vampire is a cult hit at best, and yet Mayfair Witches premiered mere months after the end of the first season, and Talamasca the Secret Order came along around a year after the second. What gives?
You are listening to The Failures.
Anne Rice sold the rights to both her Vampire Chronicles and Mayfair Witches books in 2020 as part of a package deal. As she said in a statement, "It's always been my dream to see the worlds of my two biggest series united under a single roof so that filmmakers could explore the expansive and interconnected universe of my vampires and witches." So from the start, it was kind of assumed that AMC wasn't just going to make one show based on one book or one series of books, but a bunch of shows that would kind of interlink and connect, that they were going to make a cinematic universe. And these shows do cross over some. A Mayfair Witch turns up in the Vampire Lestat, multiple characters from Interview with the Vampire make cameo appearances in the Talamasca show, and Mayfair Witches mashes together a couple of characters from the books to make a new character named Cyprian Grieve, who is a Talamasca agent. Man, they love their wacky names, don't they? I guess Anne Rice did too, to be fair.
Got a name?
His name's Raglan James.
Got a real name?
Do any of the crossovers make the shows better? Well, the Vampire Lestat gets a lot of mileage out of Merrick Mayfair's appearance, but the cameos in the Secret Order mostly feel like window dressing. But it doesn't really matter, because the problem with the immortal universe, as AMC calls it, isn't how well the shows do or don't fit together. It's that none of them are very popular. Because it costs money to make multiple shows that are all vaguely in line with each other, and it only makes sense to spend that money if the shows themselves are popular enough to make it back. Every studio that embarks on a new cinematic universe thinks it's going to be the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is one of the most successful endeavors in the history of media. 3 of the highest grossing movies of all time are part of this franchise. And when Hollywood executives saw how big it was, they got big bright dollar signs in their eyes, and they decided that cinematic universes were the future. Mostly, this resulted in a string of embarrassing failures. Probably the most famous example is Universal's Dark Universe, which was going to be a cinematic universe starring old-timey movie monsters like The Invisible Man and Frankenstein's monster. But it was dead on arrival because everyone hated 2017's The Mummy, which was supposed to be the launchpad. Sony tried to make a cinematic universe starring Spider-Man villains, but it couldn't use Spider-Man himself because of a bunch of legal issues with Disney. So it tried to make hit movies based on beloved characters like Morbius and Kraven the Hunter and Madam Web, which did not work. There are good TV shows that have been effectively ruined because they were forced to be part of a cinematic universe. Take The Mandalorian, the first ever live-action Star Wars TV show that premiered to thunderous applause in 2019. There was a period there where Baby Yoda was like the new mascot for Disney, Mickey Mouse who. But instead of focusing on making that show as good as it could be, Disney gave us spin-offs like The Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka, and more distant relations like Obi-Wan Kenobi and The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. By the time the third season of The Mandalorian rolled around in 2023, the brand had been seriously watered down, and the big Mandalorian and Grogu movie was the lowest-grossing live-action Star Wars film in the history of the franchise. Not every cinematic universe fails, but this many years out, I think we can safely say that the enormous popularity of the MCU was mostly a fluke. You can't reverse engineer this kind of crazy runaway success. Just ask DC. Not even Marvel is doing that hot anymore. I mean, they still have hits, of course, but they also have bombs, which never used to happen. The lightning is out of the bottle. It's over. But I think the promise of a huge cinematic universe where all these big shows are feeding into one another was too tempting for AMC to resist. So they put the cart before the horse and began planning a sprawling, immortal universe before they even knew if anyone would be interested in the progenitorship. My personal pet theory is that AMC greenlit the immortal universe because they wanted a replacement for The Walking Dead, which ended the same year Interview with the Vampire began in 2022. I can just see AMC executives in a room going like, well, we ate good off that zombie show for years, let's do vampires next. Today, The Walking Dead is yet another cinematic universe in decline. AMC made a lot of spin-offs towards the end of the original show's run and right after, but none of them are anywhere near as popular as The Walking Dead was at its peak. But the most successful spin-off, Fear the Walking Dead, premiered between the 5th and 6th seasons of the original series, then near the height of its popularity, so it was guaranteed a built-in audience. You'd figure AMC would have learned from that, but no, they were already working on Mayfair Witches before Interview with the Vampire had even debuted. And again, while I personally think that Interview with the Vampire is a great show, it was pretty clear from near the start that it didn't have the kind of 4-quadrant appeal needed to build a cinematic universe on top of it. Not to sound too hipster about it, but the show is a little too strange and grim and demented to really be a mainstream hit, and it's only leaned into that side of itself as it's gone on. Ahead of the third season, AMC actually did a lot to promote the series. Sam Reed gave a live concert as Lestat. He did brand tie-ins with Palm Wonderful. There was an album from his fake band. The Vampire Lestat was even advertised on the Sphere in Las Vegas. But the actual season had the lowest viewership of the show's run. Because of course it did. Because the Vampire Lestat is a deeply idiosyncratic, internal character journey without much in the way of traditional action. I mean, the season finale is basically one long hallucination as a dying Lestat reckons with his past, which isn't generally the kind of thing that's going to attract the masses. Part of me wants to applaud AMC for letting Roland Jones and his team make the kind of weird offbeat show they wanted to make, and part of me wants to admonish them for not really knowing what they had. Interview with the Vampire just isn't destined to be the cornerstone of a new media empire. It's destined to be passionately loved by a cult audience and to kind of bewilder a lot of other people. I think the right call would have been to just focus on Interview and then make spin-off shows down the line when and if it was a hit. This is probably unfair, but I can't help but wonder if Interview would be more popular had AMC not spread itself so thin across the immortal universe. Maybe then Roland Jones and his team could have ended the Vampire Lestat with the big concert everyone was talking about all season like they'd originally planned. They did the near-death mind journey thing because they didn't have enough money to mount the concert. But maybe they would have had enough money if AMC hadn't spent it making Talamasca, The Secret Order. That show, by the way, was canceled after the first season. And it's hard to believe that executive producer Mark Johnson still thinks he could have 4 or 5 Anne Rice shows on at the same time, as he said in a May 2025 interview. Mayfair Witches is coming back for a 3rd season. That show actually has higher live ratings than Interview with the Vampire, so good for it. And Interview will return for a 4th. It's changing titles again, this time to Queen of the Damned. And because new seasons of this show take forever to come out, I have at least 2 years to read the book, so I'll see you then.